She was left for Coyotes, buried to her neck, until a mountain man dug her out with bare hands. Let the Coyotes finish what we started. The words dripped with cruelty as Silas Grimm, the self-proclaimed judge of Dust Rock, stood over the pit of sand where Constance Bellwether had been buried to her neck. The crowd of hired thugs snickered behind him, their boots crunching on the scorched desert earth. Constance, Connie, to the children she once cared for, struggled for breath. The Arizona sun had blistered her skin all day, her throat cracked from thirst. She was 24, plump and soft-faced, her frame heavy-set, a body the townsfolk mocked long before they condemned her. Now her round cheeks burned with shame and terror. Her crime was not theft nor violence, but defiance. She had refused to marry Grimm's son, a drunk and coward, and worse, she had dared to expose the family's embezzlement of the orphanage's funds. For that, Silas declared her guilty of dishonoring Dust Rock. His sentence was worse than a noose. She would be left for the scavengers of the desert. The sun slipped low, painting the horizon, blood red. Shadows lengthened, and then came the sound, the thin, rising howl of coyotes drifting closer through the dusk. Their eyes glowed like embers in the brush, their bodies circling, sniffing the scent of helpless prey. Connie's heart pounded. She closed her eyes, whispering a broken prayer. Lord, don't let me die this way. The alpha coyote slunk forward, teeth bared, sand shifting beneath its paws. Its growl vibrated against her bones. She braced for agony. And then the desert roared. A bellow, raw and thunderous, shattered the night. The coyotes scattered, tails tucked. Out of the darkness rose a giant, broad-shouldered, wild-haired, his bare hands clawing at the earth around her neck. His voice boomed like judgment itself. Who dared do this? The mountain man had come. Constance Bellwether had never thought of herself as brave. She was large, round, with soft arms built from years of kneading bread for the orphans at Dust Rock's home for lost children. At 5'4" and weighing far more than the town's cruel tongues allowed her peace for, Connie had always been a target of ridicule. The children adored her, but men sneered and women whispered. She had learned to keep her chin down and her heart guarded until she made the mistake of speaking the truth. Silas Grimm ruled Dust Rock not with law but with fear. A gambler, a thief, and a man who bought sheriffs like cattle, he fattened his purse on money meant for hungry mouths. Connie had seen the ledgers herself, the coins meant for bread and blankets flowing instead to Grimm's card table. She had tried to stay silent, but when he demanded she marry his spoiled son, she refused, and when he struck her for it, she found the courage to speak out. The price of that courage was this: the scorching sun baking her flesh, the sand burning against her skin, the laughter of Grimm's men as they rode away, leaving her buried. Now, as night crept over the desert and the coyotes fled from the roar of something far greater, she found herself staring up at a man carved from the wilderness. Tobias Ironheart was a legend whispered in saloons. Some said he had killed a cougar with his bare hands. Others claimed he had been a soldier once, a healer turned beast, vanishing into the Redstone Mountains after the world betrayed him. To the Apache, he was White Bear, a spirit of strength and wrath, and now he was on his knees beside her, shoving aside sand with bleeding fingers. "Don't waste your breath," he said, his voice rough but steady. "Save it for when you're free." Her cracked lips parted. Why are you helping me?" He met her eyes, and for the first time that day, Connie saw no mockery there, only fury at the cruelty done to her. Because no living thing deserves to die like this. It took him nearly 2 hours. His hands tore, nails split, sweat streaked through dust and blood. Still he dug. And when at last the earth gave way and her body was released, he lifted her with ease, as though she were a child, cradling her against his chest. Connie's head lolled on his shoulder, but she managed to whisper, You don't even know me." "I don't need to," Tobias growled, striding through the moonlit desert toward the jagged cliffs of redstone. "I know monsters when I see them, and you're not one of them." Behind them, the desert stretched empty, silent except for the distant howl of defeated coyotes. Ahead lay the mountain, a place of danger, yes, but also of shelter. For the first time since the sand closed over her body, Connie dared to believe she might live. The desert night was cold, cruel in its own way, the heat of day bleeding into a chill that bit through flesh. Connie shivered as Tobias carried her across the sands, each of his strides long and relentless. In his arms she felt like little more than a bundle, though she knew her weight was far from small. Yet his grip did not falter. Her mind reeled. Hours earlier she had braced for coyotes to tear her apart. Now she was being borne through the dark by a man the town called half beast, half legend. His chest rose and fell steadily beneath her cheek, the rhythm of his heart somehow grounding her. Still, fear gnawed at her. What if this giant had saved her only to claim her as his own prize? Men had used her kindness before, and he was no ordinary man. 2 heads taller than most, arms like tree trunks, scars like maps across his skin. The moonlight caught the pale streaks in his hair, the hardened lines of his jaw. Finally, she croaked, "You don't have to carry me. I can walk." Tobias didn't slow. "Your legs are useless from the burial. You'd collapse before we made a mile. Save your strength." Shame burned in her chest, but so did something else, something unfamiliar. He spoke not with mockery, but matter-of-fact care. They reached the base of the redstone cliffs just as the moon dipped low. The path upward was jagged, marked only by the memory of one who knew it well. Tobias set her down gently on a flat rock, shrugged off his heavy coat, and draped it around her shoulders. The warmth of it, smelling of pine and smoke, enveloped her. "Stay close," he ordered. "The mountain doesn't forgive mistakes." Every muscle in her body screamed as she tried to follow. Her legs trembled, sand still clinging to her clothes, but Tobias's hand was there when she stumbled, rough, steady, never letting her fall. The climb was brutal. Wind whipped through the gullies. Coyotes yipped below, and once the shadow of a hawk swept across the moon, its cry echoing like a warning. Yet each time Connie faltered, Tobias was a silent shield. When the path narrowed along a sheer cliff, he walked on the outside, as if daring the mountain to try and take her. Hours passed. Her breath came ragged, her feet blistered, and then, at the mouth of a narrow cave, Tobias struck flint to steel. Sparks leapt, firelight flared, and the dark retreated. Inside, the cave was deeper than she expected, its walls smoothed by years of patient hands. A hearth of stone sat near the entrance, shelves carved into the rock lined with jars of herbs, bundles of dried meat, skins filled with water. This was no savage's den. It was a home. Connie collapsed near the fire he built, her body trembling. She tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. Without a word, Tobias poured water from a skin and pressed it to her lips. The first swallow was agony, then relief so sharp she wept. He didn't mock her tears. He only watched, patient, until her breathing steadied. Finally, she whispered, Why go to such trouble for me?" His dark eyes reflected the flames. "Because I remember what it is to be left for dead. Someone saved me once. This is me paying the debt forward." Her heart clenched at the weight of those words. This giant, feared and whispered about, had known abandonment too. As the fire crackled and the mountain winds howled outside, Connie pulled his coat tighter and allowed herself, for the first time in days, to believe she might be safe. Morning came slowly to the Redstone Mountains. The first light spilled across jagged cliffs, chasing away the shadows of night. Connie woke, wrapped in Tobias's heavy coat, the faint scent of pine and smoke still clinging to it. For the first time since the desert, her body was not seized by terror, but by a dull, aching exhaustion. The cave, she realized, was no crude shelter. Tobias had carved it into something close to a home. A wooden table, rough-hewn but sturdy, sat near the hearth. Clay jars lined the shelves with herbs, salves, and bandages neatly arranged. Furs were piled high for warmth. At the far end, a small spring bubbled quietly into a stone basin, its sound soothing in the hush. Tobias was already awake, tending the fire. Sparks leapt as he laid another log on the coals. His massive frame filled the cave, but his movements were careful, deliberate. When he noticed her stirring, he set down the iron pot he had balanced over the flames. "You need food," he said simply. "Eat first, questions later." The stew was plain, meat, roots, a hint of wild herbs, but to Connie it tasted like salvation. She ate slowly, embarrassed by her hunger, but Tobias made no comment, only passed her another ladleful when the first was gone. As the days passed, she began to learn his rhythms. At dawn, he chopped wood, his axe swinging in steady arcs that echoed off the cliffs. He set traps in the gullies, checked snares, returned with rabbits or grouse slung over his shoulder. He moved with the silence of a predator, but with the precision of a man long trained. Connie, still weak, tried to help in small ways. She swept the cave floor, gathered water from the spring, mended a tear in one of the quilts. Each time, Tobias's eyes softened just enough for her to feel she belonged. The small gestures undid her more than anything else. He always set her bowl of stew before serving himself. When the mountain winds howled at night, he laid an extra pelt over her, without a word. He showed her how to split kindling, his giant hands guiding hers on the handle of the axe, though he could have done the work in seconds. One evening, as snowflakes drifted through the cave mouth, Connie sat by the fire mending a torn sleeve. Tobias came in from the cold, his shoulders dusted with frost, carrying a log under each arm as if they weighed nothing. He set them down, then noticed her fumbling with the needle. "You're holding it wrong," he said, crouching beside her. She flushed. "I've mended clothes my whole life, not with hands that still ache from being buried alive." His large fingers brushed hers, steadying them. The contact was brief, but her heart leapt. Their life in the cave grew into a rhythm. She began to laugh again, quiet, hesitant at first, then freer. When she spilled flour all over the table, Tobias grunted, shook his head, and muttered, "Wasteful," but the corner of his mouth tugged upward in the ghost of a smile. At night, when the fire glowed low, Connie sometimes found him staring into the flames, shadows etching his face in hard lines. She sensed a weight behind his silence, a history he carried like an unhealed wound. Yet when she asked, he only said, "The past is heavy. Best not to drag it into the present." Still, in those quiet hours, she dared to believe she was no longer just a burden he had rescued from the sand. She was part of something, his routines, his silences, his world. One evening, as she laid out bowls for supper, Connie said softly, "You could have left me there. Most men would have." Tobias met her gaze across the fire. His voice was low but steady. "Most men aren't worth the ground they stand on. You are." The words struck deeper than any kindness she had known. She pressed a hand to her chest where her heart hammered, and for the first time since her burial in the desert, Connie felt herself begin to heal. The mountains kept Connie safe, but safety was never permanent in a land ruled by greed. She was mending one of the pelts by the fire when Tobias returned late one evening, his coat torn, his knuckles raw. He said little as he washed his hands in the spring basin, but the tension in his jaw told her he had crossed paths with more than just wild animals. "What happened?" she asked quietly. "Riders on the low trail," he muttered. "5 of them, men of Grim." Her stomach knotted. "They know I'm alive." "They suspect," he corrected, drying his hands with a strip of cloth. "Grim won't rest easy until you're silenced. If you go back to Dust Rock, you'll be swallowed whole." Connie lowered her eyes to the scarred hand in her lap. "If I stay hidden, then Grim wins. The orphanage will never get the truth. The children will suffer." Tobias studied her across the firelight, his face unreadable. At last he said, "You've more courage than most men I've fought beside." She looked up sharply. "Fought beside?" He hesitated. The silence stretched, until finally he leaned back against the cave wall, eyes shadowed. "I was a field surgeon during the war. I stitched boys back together, only to see them thrown into the meat grinder again. When it ended, I thought peace might come. Instead, fever took my wife. Greed took my son. Railroad men who wanted my land, and the sheriff who looked the other way. I buried them both with my own hands." Her breath caught. She had known Tobias carried a heaviness, but not this. "That's why you live here," she whispered. His eyes hardened. "That's why I don't trust people. Men like Grim will always win in towns built on coin and corruption." Connie's voice trembled, but she forced the words out. "Not always. Sometimes one voice can change everything. I spoke because I had to. If I go silent now, what does that make me?" He stared at her, and in his silence she saw the battle within him, the instinct to protect by hiding, and the memory of everything he had lost when he trusted. Days later, their fragile peace cracked. Dust Rock's gossip slithered up the mountain in the form of 3 bounty hunters, hired hands greedy for Grim's gold. Tobias spotted their campfires in the valley below, too close for coincidence. That night, as wind whistled through the cliffs, Connie asked, "Do you regret saving me?" Tobias turned on her sharply. "Never." "Then don't treat me like glass," she said, voice rising. "I was left to die, and I lived. I won't sit in a cave while others fight my battles. If Grim comes, I'll face him too." Her defiance stunned him. For a long moment he only stared. Then slowly the corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but close. "You've got iron in you, Connie Bellwether," he murmured. "Maybe more than me." The tension between them shifted after that night. She was no longer a burden to shield, but a partner whose resolve matched his own. Yet the danger grew sharper. Grim was tightening his grip on Dust Rock, spreading rumors that Connie was a thief, a liar, a temptress who lured men to ruin. The town had chosen its side long before, and it wasn't hers. One morning, Tobias returned from scouting with a grim set to his jaw. They're coming, not just bounty hunters. Grim himself with a dozen men. They'll be here by sunrise. Connie's throat went dry. The desert had nearly swallowed her once, and now it sought her again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Tobias loaded his rifle, slid a knife into his belt, and met her gaze across the fire. If they want you, they'll have to go through me, and through these mountains, and through God himself. Her fear trembled, but beneath it burned something stronger. She moved to his side, resting her scarred hand on his massive arm. Then let them come. The first light of dawn bled across the redstone cliffs when Grim and his men arrived. Dust rose in clouds behind their horses, rifles gleaming as they dismounted at the foot of the mountain. Connie watched from the cave mouth, her heart pounding, as Tobias stood tall before her, a giant carved from stone. Grim's voice carried up the slope, slick with arrogance. "Bellwether, you should have stayed buried. Come down now, and maybe I'll make it quick." Connie's blood froze, but Tobias stepped forward, his voice booming like thunder rolling off the cliffs. "You'll not have her, not while I breathe." Laughter echoed from below. "A wild man playing hero? You think you can fight us all?" Tobias's gaze swept the ridges, the gullies, every secret trail he knew like the veins of his own body. "This is my mountain," he growled, "and it won't be you who walks away." Then the shooting started. Gunfire cracked, echoing between stone walls. Tobias pulled Connie back inside, pressing her against the cave wall. "Stay low." Then he was gone, moving into the rocks with the silent fury of a predator. From above he struck. Rolling boulders sent two men sprawling. Shots rang out. One bullet grazed his arm, but he didn't flinch. His rifle boomed once, twice. Horses screamed and scattered, throwing riders into the dirt. Connie's heart raced. She could not sit idle. Snatching a burning brand from the fire, she rushed to the mouth of the cave. When one of Grim's men scrambled up the slope, reaching for her, she swung with every ounce of strength. The torch slammed into his chest, flames licking his coat. He howled, tumbling back into the dust. Tobias was everywhere, appearing from shadows, striking with fists, blade, rifle butt. Grim's dozen men shrank with every blow until only the gambler himself remained, panting, his fine coat torn, his gun trembling in his hand. "You should have stayed hidden, Ironheart," Grim spat. "This isn't your fight." Tobias strode forward, blood streaking his arm, his eyes burning with fire. "When you buried her, it became my fight." Grim lifted his pistol, but before he could fire, Connie's voice cut through the air. "Silas Grim, the truth is coming whether you kill me or not. The orphans know. The books will be found. You can't bury guilt in sand." Her words rang across the canyon like a bell. Grim faltered. In that heartbeat, Tobias lunged, wrenching the pistol from his hand and slamming him into the dust. Silence fell, broken only by the ragged breaths of the defeated. Grim lay groaning at Tobias's feet, his men scattered like chaff. Connie stepped forward, her scarred face lifted to the dawn. She no longer felt like prey waiting to be devoured. She felt alive, unbroken, unafraid. Tobias looked at her then, his chest heaving, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself a smile. The battle left the mountain quiet again. Smoke from spent rifles drifted into the pale morning sky, mingling with the scent of pine. Grim was bound and broken, his men scattered. For the first time since her burial in the desert, Connie felt the weight of fear lift from her chest. Inside the cave, Tobias tended his wounds with the calm of a man used to pain. Connie insisted on helping, her hands trembling as she wrapped bandages around his arm. He watched her in silence until she dared to meet his gaze. "You fought for me," she whispered. "I fought because it was right," he said, voice low. Then softer, "and because you matter." Tears burned her eyes. She had been mocked, discarded, left to die. Yet here, in the heart of the Redstone Mountains, a man who had sworn off humanity had chosen her. That night, as firelight danced on the stone walls, Tobias placed a blanket around her shoulders. The cave was warm, the world outside far away. He sat beside her, his massive hand covering hers. "You're safe here," he said. "This can be your home now, if you'll have it." Her throat tightened. She pressed her forehead to his shoulder, her voice breaking. "I've never had a home where I wasn't a burden. With you, I feel like I belong." His arms closed around her, strong and sure, as if he had been waiting years to hold her. Outside, the wind carried the hush of the desert. Inside, two broken souls found the beginning of something whole. Connie had been left for the Coyotes, but love had dug her out of the sand. Every scar, every wound, every betrayal can become the soil where courage takes root. Connie was left for death, but love found her in the desert. Tobias thought he had buried his heart, yet it beat again because she believed in him. Stories like theirs remind us that even in the harshest places, whether desert or mountain, kindness and love can still bloom. Tell me, where in the world are you listening from? Your comments remind me that these tales reach across oceans and hearts. If you still believe love can conquer cruelty, don't leave. Our next story is waiting for you.